Good morning, Clayton. It's Gareth
Good
McGlynn. How
morning.
are you?
I am doing fine, Gareth. And you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for coming on the Preconstruction podcast. It's nice to have you.
Glad to be here.
Good. I've been chasing you for a while now. We've been in to and fro for a couple of reasons. One reason is your extensive experience in design build, which I'm fascinated about. And the other reason is your ability, and throughout your career, you've stayed at such a high level within a multitude of sectors. So, was the design build, I know that you've been in it for quite a while, was that always a conscious kind of area that you wanted to get into, even when you were studying?
Yes, it was. When I was in college and learning the construction engineering trade, I started out as a civil engineer in school, and I found that, I wanted to build things. Yeah, but the school was set up, you're learning how to design, and that was about it. And I talked to my professor, said, I want to go do construction. I'm going to leave school and go do this. And he said, well, we have a new program, construction engineering technology, and that's going to be exactly what you're talking about. And so I stayed in school and was in the first graduating class from Montana State in that degree. And that's what it's all about, is taking a design background, knowing that, and then building. And it's how you put together pricing. And we learned the full gamut in college because our professor actually came, I call it, from the real world. Most academics they're just academic types.
Yeah.
He had been a project manager for Kiewit, and our estimating class we studied was a project he actually built. And so we
Wow.
had to go price it and compare our final pricing at the end of the quarter was against his actual budget on what it cost.
Very
And,
good. And
and
how
so
close? How close were you?
we were only about 300,000 over his budget, which was the requirement. If you went under his budget, your grade went down because you were losing money. We did it in a team of 5 within our group, and we all took different parts. He said, this is how it's done in the real world. And that's what he always taught. And all the engineers, the professors we had at the school, there were 28, and 24 of them had their doctorates, but the majority of them had actually been working out in the real world. And that's all the classes, a lot of the classes they taught, they used real life examples on projects they had worked on, road design, and here's quarries 11 miles apart, here's the road mix design. Okay, what's the best way to do this, and come up with it.
What a great way of great way of getting your degree. Great education.
Yeah, it was a good start.
Very good. And then you went from that, and then you went into the army as I think you were captain.
Yeah, I made captain. I had an Army ROTC scholarship, paid for my schooling, and then so went into the Army and worked in a combat heavy unit, a combat engineer unit, advanced to the degrees, and ended up getting out because within that, although I loved the service, I didn't get to build things. It was military stuff and go blow things up, and
Yeah.
people dictating your career that you only talked to for a minute and a half and said, oh, you'll make full colonel in 24 years. But if you're not enjoying it, okay,
Yeah.
I enjoyed the people. I actually didn't enjoy, I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and that was to build things. And that's why I got out of the service.
Very good. But I'm sure you learned quite a bit within your time there as well.
Oh yes. I mean, the different roles I had, that was one of the deals. Was I had some great mentors within the military. In fact, I still keep in touch with several of them. But it was, you learn how to plan. One of the things the Army teach you how to do is to plan.
Yeah.
And the service was where scheduling started, CPM scheduling. So you learn how to, and I was a battalion operations officer, and you're trying to plan a whole organization. You plan project schedules, where troops are going to be, when the materials need to be there. So it was a great basis of learning to take back to construction in the real world again. Here's all this capability I have of doing this at a very young age that most people don't see until they get 5, 10, 15 years into their career. I was getting it in like in year 2.
You were way ahead of the game, and that's the key. I mean, if you're in a design build project and you can actually think about those things at the design stage, I mean, surely it's better off for the project.
Well, yeah, you learn to really think ahead. And having been in construction so long, I mean, I learned from my troops, and I've learned from the people in the field and the construction companies I work for, because those are the frontline people, the subcontractors. I learn from them. They tell me the best ways to do things and things to look out for. So you're always learning in your career. If you can never stop learning.
Yeah.
Things always change, but you learn from the people that are doing it, because they give you insights that you don't get sitting in an office. So you go out and visit the field, walk a job, talk to them, find out what's right, what's wrong. And then in a design build career, then when you're going back and you're looking at plans for the next stage, you remember those things. This didn't work right. We had problems. We ended up with change orders on this. This is what we had to do to fix it. Well, let's get it straight on this set of plans. That makes your job easier. The field construction is easier, and then you don't get change orders, and then the owner's happy.
Which is unusual, but nice.
Yes.
Because you've held quite a number of positions, from senior project executive, pre-construction manager, estimating manager. What was your favorite? I know that estimating and pre-construction, I think, is your passion, but how important was the field experience that you got, but also at such a high level?
Well, thing it is, I love it all. That's the deal. I love design build. I don't like hard bid work. I actually don't like most government work if it's not design build, because I don't think I bring value to the table and the team that works for me. That's why I like design build, and I really like taking it as my bosses described me as a master builder, able to develop a budget from a sketch on a napkin and take it through the design stage and actually go build it and bring it in a quality project on time or ahead of schedule and within budget, and deliver everything that the owner wanted. That's what I love to do.
Yeah.
The gist of, and he's the one who asked me basically to drop doing the construction. And his statement is, I can find more project managers I can shake a stick at. I can't find people like you that know the whole process and can get it to that stage and manage that, because managing your costs is done early on in the pre-construction process. That's when it's easier to make changes. You're not redesigning and slowing down the design process. If you paid your design team and then you figure out you're way over budget halfway through, then you're going to have delay, and you're going to spend money redesigning the plans, and that's going to slow everything down. And if you don't do it, or you do it too late, it's major changes to it, or you're going to end up with a bunch of change orders out in the field.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've got kind of a knack for that. And so that's what and pretty much ever since then, that's why I've stayed more on the pre-construction side, except when I went to be a project executive and oversee the whole thing, including the pre-con and the construction side of it.
Very good. And then the design build, it seems to be coming back into fashion. It's becoming sexy again, design and build, after being kind of a lot of competition, other methods of doing things. But design build seems to be now the preferred choice of doing things. What are the real key advantages of doing design build instead of something else?
Well, when you're doing design build, the key is, again, I've worked for a lot of developers, so it's all in-house, knowing exactly what they want and trying to design to what they want and having your standards and keeping with them. And once you do that, it makes the whole process of construction easier, because you're taking all that knowledge you've had, which subs you can use, what is the best method for doing it, for building something in the quickest time at the best cost available. And that's the key of design build. And when we're doing this, we hire outside typically two of the companies we had in-house architects. Most of the companies have outside architects and engineers. When you have in-house, they know those standards and they stick to them. And that makes it easier when you're pricing and working in the field, because things aren't changing. When you use third party, you need to make sure that you're getting them your standards and how you do things, because what we're doing where we're doing that right now is we give them our standards and say, this is how we do things and this is how we want you to use these details in the projects, because that's what works for us. That's what our subs say is most effective, and it proves out, and it provides the quality we want in our projects. And so that's that whole key, is controlling that from the very get-go, from the beginning. Just, this is how we do things, and we're going to keep doing it this way because it works. Now, at the same time, you still have to be open when new products come along to look at them that change and may provide that. So you never want to say never, but it's, you want to do testing on something when you start doing changes to say, we're going to try this on this project, look at it and see how it goes, and do we want to adapt that going forward into our process and how what our standards are. That's the beauty of design build. You're able to do that and deliver. Typically, you can deliver projects quicker in design. Again, you have standard details you're always using. And the construction process and the construction schedule is typically faster because of that. And you can actually stage start early. Okay, I'm going to start my earthwork and utilities, get those going while they're finishing up the plans on the actual building you're going to be putting on the site, because you know what you're going to be doing. So you're allowed to do that easier in design build than you are if it's a design, bid, build process.
Yeah. And you touched on it recently with a couple of contractors that you work with the architectural for in-house. That's really important. I do know that the guys down there beside you in Dallas, the Beck Group, that was something Peter Beck learned very, very early on when the company nearly went bust, because he didn't have control. He didn't have the people in-house and didn't have everything in place. He had to rely on other people. So he just said, right, this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to become as fully integrated as possible, and he brought the architects in-house. There's not many firms that do that, but I think it is an advantage.
Right, it is. I mean, I've worked for firms, like I said, we had in-house design capability. In fact, I ran, when our head person upstairs left, our lead business development guy was the registered architect, but he was on the road all the time. So in addition to my duties of being operations manager and that, I went up and oversaw the design department for 9 months and learned
Nice.
a lot in that process.
Brilliant.
And it's, you know, and so it made me a better estimator and a project manager because I understood the details. But then I was also to take to the design team, I took them out to the field, because it's surprising, and it has gotten worse over the years. I call them CAD jockeys now. They don't like it, but it's true. If they think it's in the system, that's the detail and that's the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
Well, I took them out to the field and took them to a lunch, and we walked a couple of the projects, and then I showed them what we actually had to do in the field to make it work, and how the detail that they had was something they just pulled out. And so that was what I did over that 9-month period. I basically, hey, these details we don't do all the time, just store them. We're going back to the details we've always used, because 80% of the details never change typically on a project. That if you're building the same type project, apartments, a car dealership, an industrial warehouse, whatever it may be, you're using the same details.
Yeah.
And then 10% of the time you may have to adapt it because of a specific site condition. And then maybe that 5 to 10%, you might have something unique you haven't come across before that you have to come up with figure out the new detail for it. And then in the same way, it's into the pricing as well. It's something you may not have seen. So because of that, so you have to work hand in hand with the design team to make sure that this detail they're coming one, it's practical, it's cost efficient, and it can actually be built.
Yeah, exactly. And funny, the same does the same go with your actual estimators that you bring on, because you've managed quite a lot of estimators throughout your career. The same, do you bring the estimators on site? Do you give them site experience if they haven't had it, or do you prefer bringing them in with site experience?
I've done both. I typically find that people who have some site experience adapt a little quicker. And I always, I make sure my estimators are always being continuously trained and updated. Hold weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings. We go visit job sites and walk and talk with our field teams to say, did we miss something? Is something wrong? Is there a detail we missed? Because we're in a pre-construction team, we are the eyes for construction. And if we can catch it in the design stage, we can get it corrected, and then they don't have to do RFIs out in the field and end up with change orders on doing that. So it's that whole deal. You train, you're always continuously training and learning your team. And as I tell everywhere I've been, I'm training them to take my place.
Yeah.
That's my job as their mentor and their leader, to train them to someday take over my position.
And that's fundamentally why the Preconstruction podcast exists. It's about knowledge retention. Obviously, we're not going to be able to download everything from your brain today, but it's really about understanding what makes you good and letting the next generation, the guys now are in college, they're just graduating, maybe they're in an internship, they listen to this, they listen, they learn, and they take it on board, and they maybe adapt some of their work so that they become better estimators or better pre-construction managers. So that's good, because the thing about you as well, as much as your design build experience, you've done all sorts of projects, both nationally and internationally. Give me an idea of how difficult it is doing international projects.
Well, international is, most of the work I did was government work for the federal government. We built the U.S. Embassy in Bangkok, did some other projects in Egypt, embassy in Hong Kong, and then we had public transportation work in the Philippines that we did, and road work in Cambodia. It's a total different mindset, and that was kind of where my training in the Army about thinking ahead really gave me a big advantage, that thinking farther down the road, because in international work, it's logistics. You're shipping, when you're doing government work for the US government overseas, the Buy American clause is in effect. And so you have to buy American product and ship it overseas. But at the same time, the State Department gives you exemptions to purchase locally. So you have to understand that and the rules of the game for doing that. So, and for instance, when we were building the embassy in Bangkok, when you start, you think I can get my materials delivered. They're just, I can go get drywall from my local distributor, 10 miles down the road. Well, drywall for that project is about a 6 to 8 month lead time from getting the RFI, your submittal done and approved. Okay, then you purchase it, you have to ship it to the port and have it be inspected by the US government before you can load it on the ship and send it over to the port. And then we're sitting, and it was a 45-day shipping time from New Orleans to Bangkok. And then it could be 2 to 3 weeks for it to clear customs in Bangkok before it got to your job site. And so you're talking, I have to get this on board and buy this out basically 6 to 8 months, actually, for these little bits of material and whatever you're doing, and then multiply that across everything what's on the project and going through and making sure when anything that included shop drawings, the door submittal, door and hardware submittal and stuff like that. My door and hardware submittal, that book was, it was 3 different books, 3 different 6-inch binders between how they put together the door and hardware schedule. Wow. To go through on that. And the State Department was amazed. I actually have still kept a copy of that, because the notes they put on it, that they said they had never seen one like that. Now, I didn't do it. It was my contractor that put that together. No, it wasn't me. He said, look, I'm doing this. This is how we do it. And we could go through every door when we shipped it and it got there. All the hardware was already labeled with that specific door number within the building. So they could just go in and pick this box, and that was all the hardware that was needed for that door when they went to go put it in place. They didn't have to go get parts and pieces. It was all in an individual box.
Wow. So it was stupid proof, really.
Yeah. And that's the other thing about what we do, is the relationship with our vendors and our subcontractors is so important in pre-construction, because that's where we learn from them how to do things and how to do them right, or we can give them guidance from what we learned from other groups and, on doing this on other projects.
No, I'm just thinking from a subcontractor point of view, there's obviously a lot more work in building an embassy in Hong Kong than there is building any building 100 yards down the road or 10 miles down the road. Does the price differ, I would imagine?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, when you're doing international work, it's totally different. Some of your work is done overseas. You typically find a local labor force, or what we did in Bangkok, we partnered with a large general contractor from Bangkok,
Okay.
because a lot of the work you do actually ends up being self-performed, especially in third world countries. There's secure parts in an embassy that only Americans can do, though. And so, but interestingly enough, there's a lot of Americans, we call them expats, that live overseas,
Yes.
and they thrive on doing that work, and they love it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them that lived in Thailand. We had a bunch in Egypt as well. And so, you know, you find relationships. That's one of the things in international work. Every country is different, and we had arrangements in different countries around the world. And so when we went into a country, we knew who our partner was going to be when we were bidding a project and putting it together. And basically, they were always exclusive.
Yeah, of
So
course.
we told them we weren't going to be bidding a job, then they could go team with somebody else.
Very good. And then, of course, listen, if you're an expat in that country, I've been an expat in quite a few countries, and it'd be an honor to go and build the US Embassy in that country. So I'm sure you're inundated on resources. So that's fascinating. And then give me an idea. I mean, that kind of touches on another thing. We talked about it. You were 2 years as senior project executive with a modular building company, one of the nation's largest modular builders. Give me an idea on your thoughts on modular building. That was in 2007, how it's changed and what it looks like going forward.
Well, interesting enough, it was a unique experience. I'll say that. How I got into it was into that world was they wanted to become a general contractor so they could control their own destiny, just kind of like you talked about Beck and them wanting to control their own destiny.
Yes.
Well, they wanted to do things the same way. That's why I left a general contractor and went there to be the head of their construction on that. As it turned out, they changed their mind. Their venture capital firm that came in changed their mind on it and said, no, you make more money as a sub than you do as a general contractor. And I think most general contractors can agree with that, because I've seen roofers and driving a Lamborghini, and I've seen the boats they have that I could only dream about. So there may be something to that side of it, but it was a great learning experience, because it was a design build project that we did for Fort Bragg for a brigade coming back from Iraq. And it was a design build contract, 1 year duration from start of design to last building being turned over. That was the schedule, because they were coming back in June and we were awarded in July.
Wow.
And so we had to start design right away and go through and get the site work. It was a joint venture with a couple other firms on doing that, but we were the modular portion of that, which was actually the largest total dollar amount out of the whole project as well. So we had various buildings. We had apartments for the troops to live in, and then we had the company and brigade headquarters, a dining hall. We had storage facilities, et cetera. We had to build to go through and do that. So it was overseeing that, and 3 different plants from 3 different parts of the country being shipping from Texas. 2 of them were in North Carolina where it was at, but they each did different things within that. So it was very challenging and working through on that, but we got it done. But one of the things learned about within there and the process we had, when you ship long distance, one, it's expensive, and things as tight as you make them in the plant shake loose. And so you end up spending a lot of time reworking project. And ours were all done basically on wood, and that in order to meet their budget that they were aiming for. You can build them out of steel stud frame and steel base and stuff like that as well. That is a more solid product and ships better when it does that. When you come into doing modular, it depends on what you're going to build with it. That's the whole point. There are good projects for modular, and there's some that really have challenges being modular to go with that. And so that's that whole key. What is the right project? and being able to do that.
And do you think there's a particular industry that's suited to modular?
Well, you can see that it depends on the simplicity you want, because you have limitations within modular that you're building in this rectangular piece that you have to fit all of these pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order for it to be cost effective, the fewer varying types of platform that you have, it's going to be easier to put together and less expensive, because you've limited all these changes you're going to do for the ins and outs, the widths, and then you get back into, depending upon where you're shipping, there are restrictions on widths that you can have on that platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go to ship, because one of the things we came across when we were shipping from Texas to North Carolina, we couldn't travel on Sundays going across South Carolina to get to North Carolina.
Yes. Wow.
That type stuff. So there were limitations and sizes on the roads. Again, that affects costs and shipping routes because of the width of whatever that module may be.
Mm-hmm.
Length was typically never a problem. It's the width.
Okay.
Because of the highway system and being able to get there. And so there's maps out there for truck routes and stuff like that, avoiding those places, and the heights as well on what are you doing for shipping and what type of platform are you shipping on a flatbed, shipping on a real low boy, if you have a taller space and stuff like that. So there's limitations you have within that. I come back, if you do simple multifamily, I think hotels and motels, it is great for that, because if you go into a hotel and motel, think of how many different size units do they have? Not too many.
No.
So it's very simple, and the ins and outs on the outsides typically aren't that much. Or if you do, then that's where you end up putting a PTAC unit or something on that vertical that goes out, so that you can have your louvers on the side, not facing out on the street or wherever it may be that you're doing. So there's good places, there's good projects, and there's not so good projects.
Yeah.
You could try and build them all, but if they're not very good, you're going to have a lot more compatibility issues, and it's going to cost you a lot more. And retrofitting that stuff out in the field can really be a challenge if it's not designed right and put together right in the plants to go through.
Yeah, I'm seeing quite a few mergers and acquisitions in that space, and I can see general contractors or AEC firms leaning towards it more in the last 2 or 3 years. It's an interesting space that I see becoming, like the design and build, it's becoming sexy again. I think it's becoming more sought after from an owner and developer's point of view.
Well, I agree with that. And again, as they come in, they need to come in eyes wide open to understand some of the pitfalls and mainly the limitations of what's going to occur with that. And then they also have to deal with the local jurisdictions and their codes that they're going to have, and is their plan approved by the state, or, so there's a lot of items that they have to deal with on the design side on that for having approvals on those. Luckily, we were, like I said, we were a national firm, and we were virtually licensed in every state, because basically our plant had to build to the code of whatever state we were shipping to.
Okay.
And so you have, we did ship some up north, but the majority of ours was in the Southwest. And then that's why we had a plant on the East Coast and a plant on the West Coast. And then they handled the designs for those areas. Typically, we tried not to ship, again, long distance, because when you ship long distance, it's expensive to do that. And we're still, construction is a cost competitive market. So someone's got to want it or not want it and be willing to pay for it. So
very good. Yeah, no, appreciate that. Interesting. And then give me an idea. Listen, we know that estimating, pre-construction, even construction, it's a stressful industry. What do you do to relax or kind of get away from it?
I love to golf. I don't golf enough, but you can take out a lot of frustrations on a golf course, just whatever it might be. It's in that little ball, and you just whack away, and it's amazing,
Yeah.
That, and then when you hit those great shots, it just makes you,
it's all worthwhile.
you feel good about that.
There's
You know?
always one or two shots. If you're anything like me, I'm a social golfer, but there's always one or two shots that brings you back the next week.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you go back and okay, well, it didn't go so well today. That's okay. You know, I can stop it. You know, relax afterwards. And I enjoy music and going to concerts. My wife and I, and that. So we do that and just try and get those guys that we want to go see. Or there's some local. I live in McKinney, Texas, and we have a great downtown historic district with live music, and we'll go down and just listen to the bands we like, and just live music in a bar, being with friends. That's as relaxing as it can get.
Yeah, there's a great nightlife or that sort of entertainment in Dallas, Texas. I was there in January, visiting a few clients and candidates, and I really was blown away. I didn't know what to expect. It was my first time in Texas, first time in Dallas, and I was good that I hadn't got any expectations. I mean, my understanding of Dallas was J.R. Ewing back in the day on
Yeah.
TV. But I was blown away by it. The culture, the differences, the people were incredible. I couldn't get over how friendly they were. That was the one thing that stood out for me, how friendly the people were. They could do anybody that you asked anything for would do anything for you, and people were always there on hand to help you.
Yeah, I mean, that's Texas. I mean, I grew up in Montana, but I've been in Texas pretty much all but 3 years, courtesy of the U.S. Army since I graduated. And we are. And again, in the construction industry, it is a very small world. And I've always found that you treat people with respect, you help them, and they'll always be there to help you or give references if they can't do it. And that's the beauty of, of our industry, I think, is it is a small world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes back. You treat people right, they'll always take your phone call, they'll help you out and give you guidance, even if they can't do it, or they know somebody that knows somebody that can help you out when you run across something you haven't done or whatever, and give you some guidance. So
even nationally, it's a small world. Pre-construction and estimating, that's the community that we work within, and it is so small. There's always somebody who knows somebody who knows someone. And they really are great people. We get a lot of referrals. We get a lot of the network trying to help each other out. It's really enjoyable space. And then the other thing, and I know that the people listening and our audience will really, this is one of the questions along with the design build side of it that I wanted to ask you. You've been involved in modular, you've been involved on the client side, the developer side, the general contractor side, the construction management side. What is the differences between, especially on the owner side and the developer side, and the general contractor construction management side? What are the differences when it comes to pre-construction and estimating?
Well, in my take on being on the general contractor side, you're looking out for your best interests normally. And you're looking to see what's in there and trying to find the gotchas. And I'll say somewhat, it depends on the contractors and what type it's going to be. If it's, the venture that you're having, if it's public work, it's totally different because you're bidding those plans and specs and doing that, which is why I don't normally like public work. It's like you're looking for the loopholes.
Yeah.
And what you worry about on that side as a general contractor, if you see something that's wrong, do you want to go ahead and include the money for it or not to do it right? And a lot of the contractors want to do that. They want to do it right, but at the same time, they have to worry about, if I'm going to add this money in there, will I win the job or not?
Yeah.
And that's that whole deal. If you're working on, I'll say, the owner side of this and development side, what you're looking for on my pre-construction teams, we're looking for those same things. What's missing? What's not right? And including that within our budget and trying to get the design team to include those items in there so it is built right and we don't get change orders later. And so that's that slight difference in doing that. The GC is worried about winning the job and what can he do. Now, if depends on the type of arrangement that's being tried within that, if they have that working relationship with the developer, they may come in and say, well, yeah, here's our bid for this, but here's things we saw that aren't included in our budget we think you're going to need, then as a developer, I'm saying, okay, that's great. Oh, no, we have the money to cover that. Oh, we didn't see that. We have to, we're going to need that. So yes, we got to get that into the budget, and better to get it up front, because as I've learned over time, again, with my subcontractors and everything else, better to get it up front, because the ad later is going to cost you a lot more. Oh, and that credit for not doing something and taking it out, typically you're not going to get the credit you thought you were going to get, because they're going to still typically keep their overhead and profit, and they'll just drop the cost of the materials. Again, our trades are different, because I've spent the majority of my career here working in Texas, and we've been blessed with a very good workforce that's very cost competitive. And so I know there's differences if you're building in California. The times I built in California and my counterpart out there, when we talk about our differences, we design and build totally different in California in our company than we do in Texas. And cost comparisons, their projects basically are 2x ours. And they end up building a lot bigger, because of a lot of that is location, the labor rates, things like that you have in Southern California that we don't have those issues here in Texas. Yeah. And that's part of that issue. I think when you come back to one of those states, when you come back to modular, where is modular really cost effective at? It's really cost effective in high cost labor areas, because it's done in a plant. Yeah. When you're here in Texas, it's actually more of a challenge, because our field labor, you get a lot more flexibility on what you can build. So you can build things that you can't build in modular and still be very cost competitive. And so that the gap in Texas between modular and regular building is not as great as it is in high priced areas like California, New York, up in the Northeast, stuff like that. And so again, when you're doing that and building modular, timeframes and stuff like that as well, modular should be quicker. You can get things done. You can do your dirt work and that while you're putting the buildings together. But again, we can do that here as well, that we can start while we're waiting on our building permit. We can get an early start permit for our grading and utilities and get all that in, and then we get to start our construction.
Very good.
So there's things you learn and ways to work around a lot of issues normally.
And that's what it is. It's about experience. And if you haven't experienced those, or dipped your toes in it, or had a project that's involved these things, then it's really difficult to hang your hat on it. And I think you mentioned it in our previous conversation, that it's really about the value add and about the money that you can save companies when you're going into it. Because I think you've got a history of, whether it be that meticulous, the accuracy, or the productivity of the estimator or pre-construction department. How do you go in and increase the accuracy or increase the productivity of what's the secret of an estimating team or a department?
Well, the estimating teams are always different. Depends on what you're actually building and doing on this. But as you come through, it's the guys that are working for you. What I've tried to hire over the years is people who have certain skill sets that I don't have. I want them to be the expert, not me. I can't be an expert in everything. I'm kind of that jack of all trades. I've got the experience. I know where issues are at, but I try and find people who are really good at certain things. One of my guys used to work for a door and hardware company. I let him take a look at every project we get to look at the door schedule, and he just eats it alive because of all the mistakes that are typically made. And then I had one of my guys who used to work for a stucco and plaster company and drywall. He was my in-house expert on that. And if I saw things I didn't, we'd all kind of go to him, my team would. And so we have that and to go through. I've got one guy who's really good at dirt work. And so my specialty has always been conceptual estimating, that back in the napkin, put a number to it. And, there's something in my brain. It just works a little different, I guess. You got the knack, and I've been really good at that, and not everyone is. Yeah. So you try and train your people on that, and then within that, you cross-train within your teams to be able to help each other out, that expertise. The company I'm at right now, what I did, I totally changed when I came on board, how they operated. They switched. Whoever was available, they switched. And so typically one estimator as a developer, we did budgets at every stage of the drawings: concept, the SD, DD, the permit, GMP, and then normally after that, that's where most estimating stops at this stage. Well, someone was different. Well, what I ended up finding happening was we were missing things. And so I changed the order. And when I assigned an estimator to that project, he had it all the way through.
Okay.
And when he wasn't working on something, he could help one of the other guys on their projects in the same way. So they would trade off. They could pitch in and help and do some of the takeoff and some of the scopes. But that guy was the lead estimator on that project beginning to end. And he knew everything. So as we went further into the project, he knew what decisions had already been made. And when a new team, because some of our architects changed people, and then they want to go back and change something, and they say, no, we can't do that. We VE'd that out, in the last set of plans. It's not supposed to be there. That was taken out. It shouldn't be in this set. Well, they knew that. And then that kept our process cleaner on getting our projects done in time, the plans being better, and not having to go back and do VE again on something that was already changed, because that gets frustrating because you feel you're wasting your time and effort. And we have short periods and durations, for getting that done. So that was one of the ways of doing that. And like I said, I've tried to train them. And when we did takeoffs, we implemented a new takeoff system. And when new people came on board, all the guys had learned it. Some had worked with it before. And so everyone had a different way of doing it. And when I had someone new come in, what I would have them do was go spend time working with each one of those estimators already on board, see how they use the software, and then let them go figure out what best worked for them, because it's not a one size fits all on software. People's brains operate differently, but at the end of the day, my mantra has always been, if you count it, you're going to put a number to it. Okay. It's on the plans, take it off.
Yeah.
Light poles, figure out your square footage of paving, count your number of doors, whatever it may be. You come up with these parameters, and whatever we're building, it's different in multifamily than it is in commercial work for what you're doing. But all those rules still hold no matter what you build. Count it and figure it out and be able to put a number to it. You talk to the subs, and that's
kind
of what I've done, and train them.
Yeah, and that's interesting way of it's almost giving them the autonomy to figure it out themselves, and giving them the responsibility to come to the right number without banging them overhead or micromanaging them. Because generally, if there's a software or an on-screen takeoff or takeoff system, they are taught that's the way we use the software, that's the way we do it here. So learn that way. So that's interesting. And how have you seen pre-construction technology evolving throughout the years? How important is it now to your job?
Oh, it's very important. There's different aspects of what we're using, whether it's, some of the programs now have their own takeoff software built in within it, so you don't have to use OST. And so when you actually go click on your item, it's there. You can see all the different pieces you measured. I used that on one project that I was doing out in California with a client to show them, here's what you actually had. And they were like, wow, we didn't realize that. And so that helped them better understand the pricing that I was putting in front of them by having that built into the software.
What program was that, or what software was that?
That was WinEst.
Very good. Okay.
It's been a few years since I used it. I installed that at 2 companies. Okay. And those companies today are still using it.
Good.
And I've worked with Timberline. I've worked with MC Squared, MKC's, Composer Gold. I've worked with a bunch of different ones, and of course, everyone's default is Excel. I started on Lotus 1, 2, 3. So.
Wow. Very
and
good.
So, but everyone, you can do things, and a lot of people use Excel. I like it, but there's the deal about having a true estimating software is there's a lot less opportunity for mistakes.
Yeah, a lot less
and things being left out, or someone messing up a formula, or whatever that may be. And so I had one of those in my career. You learn from your mistakes as well. Yeah. I had a long time ago. That's why I've gone to using estimating software because I had a spreadsheet and it didn't pick up one of the lines out on my spreadsheet, and my storefront didn't get rolled up into my overall budget.
Wow.
And that was a design build, and I had to go explain to the owner, and we made it right. We dropped our fee and put it into the budget and helped offset those costs. But that was our responsibility as a giant design build general contractor. But again, it's a lesson I learned, and you learn from the good things and you learn from your mistakes. And the key is don't make the same mistake twice.
That's it. You either win or you learn. Simple as that.
Right. Yeah.
And what if you were to advise now a new client to implement a particular software, which would you choose?
I think, well, one, I'd ask them what is our ultimate goal and what do they want to see from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's about the reports. We can take off, you can estimate out of anything, but it's at the end of the day, what generates the right information. And in the roles I've been in pre-construction, we kind of have, if you work for developers, there's two things. You're working for the construction side on how they put together their budgets, but then you're also having to produce reports for the development side. And if you're a GC, you're really producing that budget to show to the client and how do they want to see it. Mm-hmm. And you have those standard formats. So that's the first question I'd be asking them as to what are we going to use this software for? Mm-hmm. Right now, I mean, I'd be evaluating a lot of them. There's some, I wouldn't, down at the bottom of my list, I'm not doing Excel for mm-hmm. basics. It's good to use for a little summary and get things to go put together, but I wouldn't be basing again, size of your company and what you can afford to spend and stuff like that. I still lean towards WinEst, but Timberline's good, has some limitations. Beck Tech, there's others. You go to the estimating pre-construction conference, you're going to have 8 to 10 vendors that are there that are going to tout that they've got the latest and greatest. And it's not a one size fits all. That's the whole deal as a contractor. It's what do you do? What do you specialize in? What works best for you in pricing your projects?
Yeah.
So that's the whole deal, is what works best for you for the type projects that you're working on and who your clients are.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. It's about having a niche or a vertical that you're happy with and specialize in. You can kind of diversify to a certain extent, but if you've got something that works and you're good at it, then you can generally make a lot of money from it.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Well, listen, I think, is there any advice, just before we finish up, is there any advice that you would give your younger self? You've just come out of college, maybe a couple of years experience. Is there anything, I mean, I don't want to say, did you make any mistakes, but is there anything you would advise a young estimator to do, or a way of upskilling themselves to ensure that they become a really good top-notch estimator?
Well, I would advise them to take every opportunity to learn and ask questions, and definitely go to the field. Walk the jobs, especially ones that you've bid and put together, and see if you can go out at the various stages to see what's going on, and then ask questions of your team and of the subcontractors about it, and see how they're doing things, because that's going to make you understand better the plans you're looking at when you go together and put together pricing and understand it. And you got to continue to do that throughout your whole career. Yeah. I mean, I still was taking my team out and walking jobs, and I'd see stuff that I hadn't seen before, or I missed when I was overseeing the plans and looking at them. And you continue to learn. That's the whole process, continue to learn. You can go take classes or one of the societies, AACEI or ASPE, and learn from the meetings. And within that, then you network with other pre-construction people. And we all have different backgrounds. And so you can learn from what they talk about on presentations and figure out, can I adapt that to what I'm doing? It didn't directly apply, but is there a methodology that they had for using, or some new product that they mentioned that they're using that you might be able to take into what you're building, or whatever it is that you actually do? You can never stop learning. That's the whole key.
Is that your secret for maintaining your level? Because you have been consistently chief estimator, pre-con manager, project executive for 20 plus years. What's the core principles that you stick to, or what's the secret?
Well, that's tough. I honestly, I guess it is that I'm always trying to learn, and I always look at using what I've learned, how I can take what I've learned in, like I learned from the military, I learned, from when I ran the design department, how can I apply that knowledge to what I'm doing today to make it better for,
Mm-hmm.
for the company I'm working for or the client I'm building for, to do that. And when you do that and people see that, they recognize it. So, I mean, I've always been, like I said, you touched on, I've always been highly compensated and stayed at where I was at. And you learn, and when you learn that knowledge and you use it to your best of your ability, you can stay up there and do that. But again, it's treating people fair and being respectful and being a true leader, because people will see that when you have a pre-con team and you're their leader. I've never had anyone that I've had, they'll still come back to me and call me and ask me questions and thank me for helping them on their career. I mean, our industry goes up and down. So yeah, you win people, you lose people, depending upon the economy, like we're going through right now. There's a lot of good people, that are going to be let go that probably shouldn't be, but hopefully you've trained them well and they can find a good job and continue the growth in their career. And the deal is, we reach out and help each other out when we're doing that as well.
And that's the key. That is literally the key. It's collaboration, and there's never been a more important time to look after each other. And I think you touched on it. And that's what this is about. The pre-construction estimator is about getting stories out there. And if someone picks up, or 5 or 6 people pick up on 2 or 3 things that we've discussed today that makes them a better estimator or a better pre-construction manager, then we've succeeded.
Yep. I mean, this goes back. I mean, I did that. One of the guys in the field told me just to stop on by the job. When I first started estimating for the one company, he hired me to estimate. And he told me if I ever went to a job site, this was the owner, he'd fire me.
Wow.
Okay. He wanted me to stay in the office and just estimate. Well, I was looking at plans and I had questions. So I called the superintendent and I talked to him and asked him about it. And then it was on my way home, I went by the project site because of where it was at. I could drive by it on my way to and from work. So I'd stop in on my way in and at the way home, walk the job, and then I'd call them and ask them questions. And that's how I was starting to learn. And that's where I'm going. That's why I believe in doing that today, is because I learned more doing that. And one time I just asked him, I said, Johnny, that doesn't look right to me up there. And he says, you're right. That's not right. And he said, you got a good eye for that. He said, and it's like, if it doesn't look right, this was his adage as a superintendent. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. And so that's that adage to teach people and to go through. And that's what I try to do and ask, because it's how you learn. I mean, there's new products out there. And so when you walk and you don't see it, it doesn't look right, then you can ask questions about it.
Absolutely.
What about that door trim or this hardware, or, a new way of putting down flooring, whatever it may be, or paint. Everything is always changing, or how they're doing concrete, so you're continuously learning.
That's right, yeah. And if you don't ask questions or you don't collaborate, then, and that's I think the historical way of estimators going into a dark room, into a war room, and just throwing out a pre-construction or an estimator, it's just not the way to do things anymore. The extroverts now asking questions, being creative, being collaborative, it's that, to me, I see as the best estimators right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are times I had to close the door to get things done.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. There are those occasions, but normally you can, whether it's the cubes or going through, and in my role, I would just always go around and just talk to my guys in the morning, just visit each one of them. What are they doing today, and what issues do they have? Can I help with? And to go through and do that, and then check back with them later in the day, see how things are going. And, again, it's personal contact, and taking care of your people. I mean, I learned that in the service. You take care of your people, they take care of you. I learned that lesson. I still do it today. And
That's it.
that's part of that being a good leader, is take care of your people. That's training them. And you know, sometimes you got to be harsh on them. That's part of it. But you help them learn and you make them better people and better estimators.
Clayton, I love it. Thank you very much. We'll finish on that, taking care of your people. Thank you very much for coming on the Preconstruction podcast.
And thank you for having me, Gareth. I enjoyed it, and I hope it's valuable to some people out there in their careers.
Thanks, Clayton.